Hey, everybody out there, and welcome to today's AC webinar called Sky's the Limit, in which we talk kind of a little bit more in depth about pole vault. And before we begin, I'm sure you're wondering, why in the world is a sprint hurdler / heptathlete talking about pole vault, in which I've never done? To that, I would say, you don't hang out around a track for many, many years and happen to see people screaming down a runway with a 16-foot stick planted into a small hole, go up in the air and not ask some questions. So I've definitely done my fair share of questioning what is going on over at the pole vault pits. And personally, I when I was a jumps coach at the University of Idaho, got into it a little bit more, where I worked with our pole vaulters on their sprint training and then just hung around, for the most part, just catching step. But you don't catch step without catching a few other details. But I'm very, very happy to be a part of this group to get even more in depth into the details. So today we have with us a great crew of coaches from across Canada, from 3 provinces, BC, Quebec, and Ontario. So before we begin, just a little bit of, I guess, Zoom protocol, Zoom housekeeping. So all of you on here are muted at this time. If you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, in which case we will, I'll try to get that across to our panel here. At the end, we'll have about 15 to 30 minutes for questions, but I know some of you already did send in those questions. So again, I will do my best job to make sure that all questions are answered. Also, this is being recorded. So on the next coming days, this should be on the AC YouTube channel. And anybody who's entered the NCCP number or are NCCP certified, you will receive 1 PD point for participation in this webinar. Without further ado, I would like to hand it over to our experts in the field, our coaches from across Canada, in which they will give a little brief introduction where they'll kind of just describe their role and involvement in the event of pole vault. So let's start out west with Cristina out in BC. Could you please give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, hi, I'm Cristina Weir. I'm in sunny, not really, Vancouver today. I am coaching high school kids in the club system, and then I'm also coaching collegiate athletes with the UBC team, and I've been coaching vault for about 6 years now. Also was an athlete in my younger days.
And an athlete in the pole vault?
In the pole vault, yes. Yeah.
Any other events, or just you stayed strictly with pole vault?
No, I went from gymnastics over to pole vault, so that was most of what I did.
I kind of feel like that might be a common stream amongst some of our pole vaulters. So we'll move on to Ambroise over in Quebec. Ambroise, if you could, please, a little introduction of yourself.
Yes, I'm currently coaching in Montreal with the Club Vainqueur Plus, a group about 25 people, mostly beginner from master. I've been coaching since solely the pole vault since 1983. Was a vaulter myself. 462 PB, which was good for the slowest guy on the runway. I had both my daughter and son jump at quite high level, and I think I got some experience about the pole vault. I evolved a lot since the 80s. It changed, and I'm still keeping active. Actually, I'm still vaulting myself as a master.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And that just kind of speaks to the breadth of experience that all of our athletes can have from very junior age all the way to masters.
Yes.
And then finally, we have Doug. If you could just give us an introduction and a little bit about your experience in the event.
Yeah, sure. Hi, good evening. I'm Doug Wood. I've been vaulting or involved in the sport since I started vaulting in high school in grade 10 in about 1982. I vaulted through high school and then jumped at York University through my collegiate years, and then stayed around and trained at York University through to about 1996. I was a Canadian record holder from 88 or 89 until Sean Barber came along in about 2012, and I think he broke my record. So I had it for several years, but yeah, so now I coach at Bolton Pole Vault. We have our own facility, and it's a specific vault club in Bolton, Ontario, which is just north of Toronto. We have a large group, varying much like Ambroise Club. It's juniors right through to masters. Yeah, we're pretty pumped. We have a lot of fun. It's my social outlet. We have a bunch of four or five of us that are together coaching a large group of people that we're passionate about it and really enjoy being there. We're there because we love the sport. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Doug, I hate to do this to you, but it happens to me all the time. I don't think you mentioned this, but you're also an Olympian.
Yeah, I went to Barcelona in '92. That's it.
92 and silver at the Pan Am Games. So
yeah,
a great wealth of experience across the board, across Canada. So I guess the first things first, what makes a good pole vaulter? If you're looking at an athlete, and perhaps like a lot of times athletes come from different events, what are some of the elements that you look for in a good pole vaulter? And we'll start with Cristina.
Good sprinter. You do need speed on the runway, good sprinting form, long jumpers. Yeah. And then if you have kids who have gymnastics background as well as the track background, that's definitely helpful.
Awesome. Anything else to add to that in terms of like some of the things that you've seen within your own athletes that you went, I didn't actually think that would cross over, but has worked really well. Ambroise, your experience?
Well, I would say same thing. Speed is the basic. Spatial awareness is a plus. Gymnastic background is good. Diving too could be good for special awareness, but those athletes that did gymnastic or diving, sometimes they need to be re-educated as running wise. Sometimes they don't run good, but yeah, definitely speed. The best pole vaulter, they go like almost 10 meters a second at the last steps. Like Mondo, I think he even goes 10.2 meters a second. So speed is the best quality to have. Yes.
Yeah, and I can definitely see a re-education, because a lot of the gymnasts learn to run kind of with a straighter arm.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, as you become a track athlete, you have to learn how to run with your arms. And then we take them away altogether when you put a pole in the hand. So definitely a lot of things to bring in there. Doug, do you have anything else to add to that in terms of some athletic abilities you look for in a good pole vaulter?
Well, if you ever watch World Championships, or you will go through videos of on web pages that have all kinds of high performance competitions, the one element that's common amongst all world-class pole vaulters, men and women, is their running ability. Like that just can't happen. You can't go to that level without it. It is an event of energy. So mass times velocity, that's kinetic energy. So that's about bringing energy to the box, putting it in the pole, and then harvesting it. So if you can't create the energy, it's not going to magically appear in the pole. So it's the high level, it's a must to have speed.
Gotcha. And one thing that I noticed, and as kind of like somebody from the outside looking in, I noticed that maybe from somebody who's not, I guess, well-versed in the sport, they might think upper body strength. How much does that factor in, or does it factor in at all? Or is it more just a bracing? You have to be able to brace if you're bringing in a lot of the speed in terms of injury prevention, or do we really have our pole vaulters working upper body strength a lot? And I'll start with Ambroise on this one.
Yes, well, upper body strength is important, but what's important is not doing 3 times your weight bench pressing. It's moving your body with speed. And very important, but not get too big of muscular. Yes.
Gotcha. Doug, what are your thoughts on that as well?
It's a funny thing, because sometimes you see, like, especially male gymnasts that come and come and vault with us, and you'd expect, a sure thing, but they're sometimes too strong. They're too strong. They're trying to manipulate things a bit too much. I really feel that one of the big things that I watch, and you see effective, or when they have a really strong jump, is it's very fluid. It's very rhythmic. This is a gymnastics maneuver, and you need to use natural body motion. If you start to try to really manhandle or manipulate things, then it breaks that rhythm, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. There are points in the jump that you have to take complete control muscularly and be very, very aggressive upper body wise. But if you're trying to fight against a pole that's got all your kinetic energy in it, it's still going to win. You need to be in concert with the pole, and it needs to have rhythm.
Gotcha. That's great. Christina, what are your thoughts on that as well in terms of upper body?
Yeah, I'd agree with Ambroise. It's important, but it's more about power than it is about like just absolute brute strength. So doing a lot of Olympic lifting, but not going for huge weights, more going for just moving that bar really fast.
And that's like something that you see across the board for all of our power speed athletes, sprinters, and the like, other jumpers as well. So to continue on, Cristina, I'll ask this next question. What does a typical training week look like? And let's compare like preseason, kind of moving from preseason to competitive season. What are you looking at focusing on more? Like maybe give a little overview of what a typical week looks like and how many times you're doing touches with the pole, actually doing pole work, or are you mostly doing a lot of stuff in the gym, a lot of gymnastics work on a high bar? What does that week look like from preseason and then moving into competition?
So preseason, it's a lot of speed development, speed endurance. I'm doing some of the more general strength stuff during that time. Usually preseason, when they touch a pole, they're not on the runway, they're on the track, and we're building their runway off, or building their approach run off the runway so that we can focus on form, speed, things like that. They're definitely doing gymnastics. And then once we hit into the season, depending on the week, they'd be jumping 2 or 3 times. They'd be lifting. I'm going with my collegiate athletes now, lifting 2 or 3 times. They've got a speed day. There's plyo. Sorry. Yeah. Doug?
Yeah.
Yeah, Doug. So what would
like,
a week kind of look like in terms of, and who knows, it might actually change. Like you were saying, Cristina, you alluded to your collegiate athletes, but it might be different if you're working with a younger athlete who can only come out maybe twice a week or whatever. So having to take those restrictions in place with a collegiate athlete, they're doing this all the time. Younger athletes, hopefully they're participating in other sports. So Doug, from your perspective, generally speaking, for somebody that's in the pole vault, maybe a young developing athlete versus a more elite athlete, how many times a week are we talking about seeing a pit? What kind of pit work are we doing? Is it, are we on the run, like on the track, like you said, Cristina, where we're just doing pole runs? What does a typical week look like from preseason to competition?
As you said, most of the young athletes that come to us, especially people that are already fit, they're involved in something else. They're either coming from track, or they're coming from gym, or they're coming from hockey or soccer. They have some general athletic interest. So the fitness is not an issue usually. There may be some technical challenges in how people run, and that's part of a culture that we're in that doesn't have a lot of running development in elementary school. So when you get to, like, I never learned how to run in elementary school, just run. That was it. So now when you get kids that are at elementary or high school age, they haven't had that running development, that becomes part of it. Some technical element, top technical, a lot of hurdles, a lot of skipping drills, like all of mobility. But we really do use the time we have with the kids. I mean, we see them twice a week, and it's technical. Like, it's technical either running or it's technical on the pole, on the runway with drills. We do a lot of drills. We're a big drill group. and they jump, and they have a pole in their hands pretty much the whole time they're there. And then we end with 15, 20, half an hour of like rope climbs, rings. We have rings and a high bar, and we have some rock back apparatus, medicine balls, but it's pretty general. But most of our effort is with the elementary or with the kids or with the junior kids is in the technical side. As we get a little bit more elite, then yeah, we're into a 5-day or 6-day-a-week regime. We incorporated a session of gymnastics, like with a gymnastics coach. It's not something we go to the gym and try to experiment. No, we'd love to see them in the gym with a professional coach. A lot of, like, as you would see in any kind of jumper or any kind of power speed sprinter, like a lot of time with explosive work, long jump, hurdles. But we spend a lot of time with the pole in your hands. You need to be comfortable with it, and it takes a lot of time because it's not normal. It's not a normal peeling to run with a pole, so you've got to get comfortable with it. It takes time.
Definitely. Ambroise, what does your week look like typically for a pole vault athlete?
Well, I'd say pre-season, maybe a month or 6 weeks, say beginning of the fall. Running, cardio, exercises with your body weight, like lunges, push-ups, light skipping, not very heavy, plyometrics, mitts and ball. As you get to pre-season, I would split up like that, maybe 5 times a week, 5 to 6 times a week, 2 times a week jumping, probably 2 times a week sprinting, either short sprint or longer run like 100s, 150, 200 for the more advanced strides, 2 times a week weight. Eventually you had plyo maybe once a week, but those training session can be combined. You can have like a jumping session, and after your jumping session, you can do the long run, say 100 meters, 150. Of course, some gymnastic, either around the pole vault pit with rope. We do have rope. We don't have at our training facility a high bar, which I would like to. We don't have good gymnastic equipment. Maybe it will come later. So that's about it.
So speaking to that's just kind of making me think, if I'm trying to create a training area, what are some kind of hallmark things that I would like to have in my gym that would help or be able to have access to if I have a group? What are some things? Obviously, your requisite mats. You're going to want some mats. You want to have a box. But beyond that, some of the equipment, like we talked about, high bar ropes.
Yeah.
If you had to narrow down, what are some of your top things outside of the actual pole vault equipment that you would like for your training? And I'll start with you, Ambroise, on that, because you kind of mentioned
most likely, we do have a rope, which is good. High bar. Actually, we're working on having some installed near our pit. And it doesn't need to be a high bar specific to the gymnastic, but a hard bar high enough so you can hang and do rock back drills, like the one exercise. It's called the bubkas. You can look it up on YouTube. What is this exercise? Bubka. Yeah, but besides, well, trampoline could be useful too for special awareness, but I don't think it's mandatory.
Gotcha. Cristina, what about you? Sorry, thank you. Cristina, what about you? What are kind of your wish list, if you will, of equipment outside of the actual pole vault pits and poles itself? What are some training equipment things that you are kind of like, these are a must-have versus a nice-to-have?
I think rings, like gymnastics rings. Yep. You can do a lot of drills on that, and a lot of the drills like the bubkas and stuff like that, they're a little bit easier when they're starting to do on a ring than on a set of rings than on a high bar. So yeah, rings, high bar, rope, that would be the biggest ones for me.
Gotcha. Doug, what about you? What are some of your must-haves?
Well,
and maybe some on the wish list. Wish list.
If I think about the pieces that we use now, and we've really worked pretty hard to go out and get what we want in terms of equipment. So we have a ring, we have high bar, we have rope. So those are like paramount. One thing we don't have access to indoor season, in which we would like, is be a long jump pit, because we do a lot of sand drills, like with the pole planting in the sand and working on balance, and we don't have that indoor. But it's a bit of a challenge to move a sand pit in and out of the facility every year. We use a box horse a lot, and hurdles and those kind of normal track and field apparatus that you find around, like medicine balls, shot puts, anything like that has some that you see at like almost all power speed athletes using. But those you can find anything. You can use bleachers if you don't have a box house. You can rock back on a tree branch or go to the park. There's ways to do all that stuff. But if you ever see pole vaulters in the park rocking back, you think you're in the Toronto Zoo.
I'm pretty sure I've seen some non-pole vault athletes doing that somewhere in Toronto, and almost like recruiting, but also a little bit afraid. I know that this has been brought up a little bit, talking about kind of some of the elements that lend to a good pole vaulter. How much are plyometrics a big deal? Because say for me, I've long jumped, I've high jumped. It's me, it's my body. But now we're having the element of the pole. So how much do the plyometrics, I know plyometrics are very important for, even for hurdlers, where we're doing a lot of that stuff. But now let's throw in the element of having the pole. So how good should my own body jumps be in comparison to, say, like a pure, like no pole jumper would have versus a pole vaulter? Should we be really, really good in the pure jumps to be a good pole vaulter? I'll start with Doug on this. Well, yeah, Doug, because I see the wheels turning there. So
yeah, they're turning. It's a tricky thing, because there are people that jump really, really high that probably never do any, except maybe bounding runs. They're just naturally dynamic, speedy, fast twitch people, and they run biomechanically well. Like, you see it. You even see it in a high school meet. You watch some kids, they just figured it out. They got it. But generally, and our runs, the way we kind of teach a pole vault run, it's much more, it's not really a total sprinting type run. It's a little bit more, not boundy, but it's really high in ankle speed, and like short contact on the ground. I mean, and a little bit of a longer stride than you may see in like a full-on sprinter. I don't know. It's a tough question, because we do a lot of it. I know that some people are very susceptible to injury if you overdo that. So it's a very tricky balance between being effective and being overloading people. So but it absolutely is a valuable tool for working on explosive and contact time and ultimately speed.
Gotcha. Ambroise, the same question. Like, if I'm thinking, yes. I know long jump kind of correlates well. Christine, I think you mentioned that correlates well, but how good?
Plyometrics very important, but as a physical therapist, I know the limit of doing plyometrics too much, because it can produce injuries. Not more than once a week. It's almost the same thing as being a sprinter or a hurdler or a long jumper. As much important to do those. And following on what Doug said about the type of the stride of pole vaulter, Maurice Souvion, the ex-national pole vault coach in the 80s, where I worked with in France, had a good analogy. Look at the horse, the hind legs of a horse. If you look at a horse running, it's about the same thing. If you would look, he had a movie about it. You look at a horse, same thing. A 400-meter runner type of stride.
Right. So you don't want it to be too frequent, like say for a hurdler, we really work on frequency.
Eventually, your last stride, you try to max the speed, of course.
Right.
Yes.
So it's not going to be like your pure 100-meter. There's got to be more of a rhythm to the run rather than just hauling down the runway.
Yes, with progressively accelerated to the last stride, to the takeoff.
Cristina, what are your thoughts in terms of like the jumping ability of a pole vaulter? How good does a pole vaulter have to be with actually jumping off the ground when it comes to pole vault?
Oh, I think it's very important. If you can't jump up onto the pole, there's going to be a limit to how high you're going to be able to jump with a pole. So I'd say it's very important. Just with the plyo stuff, I do that more in the preseason and the early part of the competitive season. And a lot of that is just building up like tolerance for work. Just building up strength in the lower limbs.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. So let's now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
Just want to add something. A very simple test to know if well, there's a correlation between standing broad jump and speed. There's a direct correlation. There's been many studies about it. So speed on short run and standing long jump. So you can have your athlete just test them after a few weeks to see their progress. It's almost as efficient as timing their short run. Simple.
Very interesting. I mean, as a sprinter, I probably wouldn't want my standing long jump tested too often to find out where I'm supposed to land on this chart. But no, that's very good. I think that certain things are indications of just kind of like athletic ability, explosive ability, which is kind of tantamount in our power speed athletes. Now let's move over to probably what can be a very frustrating aspect of the pole vault, which is pole selection. So what would you consider some of the most important factors that goes into pole selection? And I'll just start at the top corner here with Cristina. What are some of the things that you look for when it comes to pole selection for an athlete?
So part of it is just their age and their experience, their height, their approximate weight. Yeah, and then just watching them jump. If we're talking like beginner brand new athletes, then you're looking for a pole that's going to stay straight for them. So they can learn on that first, because you don't want to put them on something that's too soft. They're just going to end up learning bad habits and probably getting injured. So yeah, it would be their speed, their height, experience level. The better they get, the bigger and longer of a pole they're going to require.
And Doug, what are some of the things you look for in an athlete in terms of being able to select a pole?
Yeah, just as Cristina said, like when somebody starts, you start them on something that won't bend. That could be anything, as long as, and it starts to see a little bit of a bend in it, you may actually give them a stiffer pole to get rid of that bend if they're just bending it by body weight or by whatever. You just want to kind of keep that under control. And then when somebody starts, we start like on a little tiny pole just to kind of learn proper bending technique, and they progress fairly quickly usually, because we're on poles probably that are too small for them ultimately, but for their skill set, we start there. And luckily we have 100 poles, so we start at something small and progress through them. And with judging what poles people should be on and their grip height and the stiffness, that comes with experience. That's not something we can cover in this video or 5 more videos. Not a chance. You've got to see 1,000 jumps or more, and then you start to see, okay, like that pole's over bending, but you don't have a lot of pole speed, so let's put your grip down a finger and just that maybe give you a little bit more pole speed, and the pole will react a little bit better. Or it's just it's subtle. It can be very subtle changes, and the same pole with a centimeter less grip can make a difference between being successful or even misinformed, thinking I blew through this pole. So no, well, maybe not. So that's not an easy conversation, but it's something that over time you just learn by watching, and many jumps.
Gotcha. Ambroise, your input on pole selection.
Moving on what Doug's saying, it's the fitting of a pole for an athlete is a very long process. And of course, when it's a beginner, you go on small pole. eventually even a smallish pole to learn them how to bend it. And generally the pole will be too small to compete with, but generally an athlete, which is a beginner, will jump on 4 or 6 step. For more experienced athlete, of course, when you know your athlete, you will generally, you know right away what type, what model pole, what length they can take, what handhold they can maneuver. But it's a very long process, many jumps that you need to see, to watch. You need to optimize the running. You need to have them have the best run, either it's 10, 12, 16 step. So when they can control their best running, you will know what pole they will need. And the athlete will know right away also, generally.
Right. I bet you a lot of athlete feedback can give you a lot of information as well to kind of match with what you're seeing.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess this is a question that was given by one of the audience members before this webinar. It goes into pole transition. So as an athlete is moving through, so say they get through the beginner stages of working with a particular set of poles, what are some of the hallmark signs that an athlete needs to move up or move down a pole? And I'll start with, let's start with Cristina on this one. What are some of the things that you can see? There's something about the jump that you go, let's move up, or we kind of need to move back down a pole.
So if they're landing really deep into the pit, they are going to need a bigger pole. That would be one thing. If they're hitting the bar on the way up, it means the pole is coming through too fast. So you may need to go up in grip and up in pole size. If they're if they're landing really shallow and the pole's bending a lot, then you move their grip down. If they're landing really shallow, but there's not much bend in the stick and they're just really having trouble moving the pole through, then you're going to need to drop the grip and probably get them a smaller stick as well.
Ambroise,
well, nothing to add what Cristina said. I would have said the same thing. It's clear.
And Doug, what are your thoughts on that in terms of transitioning from poles within even a competition or practice setting? What are you looking for that makes you think, yeah, that's not the right one for you today?
Yeah, I think those are fairly good baseline for that. There's a couple things to add. I would say that sometimes people are very eager to move up poles. It's a pole vault disease or a pole vaulter disease. Like, gotta move up. Well, sometimes it just means I'm not always in support of that. I think sometimes it's like, I think you just need to jump a little better, or like if there's other technical corrections that can happen or that you can make without having to do too many changes to the poles. And you also, I see this with some elite athletes, they're very aware of how the pole's reacting and they will make adjustments. They'll make adjustments, Mondo especially, and Renault, very aware of how the pole's moving. So they'll make adjustments and how they're treating the pole throughout the jump, which can sometimes mislead you and think, okay, that was the right pole for that jump. And it's no, I let the air out of that pole, or I let pressure off of it because it was moving too fast. So you need their feedback as well. But the general rules that Cristina was mentioning are very thorough. Like, yes, if you've got great pole speed or the pole's overbending, you just you need to make some decisions based on how the pole's reacting and where you're landing.
So as you say that, like especially the more experienced vaulters, they'll make changes. This is like in flight. They're so attuned to their event that in flight they're able to kind of, whether it's like some of those elements of I maybe are just letting, like you said, let the air out of it. So you're not really trying to influence it so much. It's an awareness with your apparatus that can also influence the jump. It's not just, well, I'm in the air and it is what it is. There's the more experienced athletes can actually tell as they're in the midst of their jump of how to manipulate the pole to get the results that they need.
Oh yeah, when taking off, it's it's not rote. Like that ship hasn't sailed after you leave the ground. There are a million things that happen throughout that jump, and there are checkpoints in your mind too. Like there are checkpoints that you know, and you can watch a jump a million times on video and it looks great. The next one, all of a sudden somebody doesn't swing for whatever reason. And they said it felt off. You look at the video a million times, you won't see any difference, but there was something, a balance issue, or just missed the timing a little bit. So that you have to give your brain the ability to take over and trust it that when things are good, you can go. And if it's not good, trust it. It'll tell you when not to put yourself at risk. So it's intuitive. Once you get to that level, it becomes very intuitive.
That's amazing. It's crazy to think, and I know it happens in a lot of events where you just kind of have that second sense, or that sixth sense, if you will, of where you need to be and how to manipulate a certain thing. I think we see it on all sports, like say even in football or whatever it is, being able to read certain things, but being able to read something with your body is just got to be one of the coolest things while you're in the midst of a jump, and are able to manipulate to be like, well, it wasn't the greatest takeoff. However, I know that I can do this in order to get the amount of rock back that I need so that I don't hit the bar on the way up, or whatever the case is. I think this question just came in concerning pole selection. I feel like pole selection is probably a very hot topic for a lot of pole vault coaches, because they don't want to advise their athletes the wrong way to either move up or down. But it says, do coaches use moving up a pole as a reward? Is that a thing, or is that bad? Is that, as somebody's getting better, are like, do some coaches potentially withhold moving up a pole if people aren't executing certain technical skills properly? And it's like, listen, we can't move up a pole unless you're getting your knees up, or unless you're taking off the ground, or unless you're, keeping that front arm out. Do coaches do that? Is that a good practice to have, is to kind of withhold moving up a pole, seeing that it is the pole vaulter's disease? And Ambroise, I'll start with you, because I think I saw you shaking your head there.
No, I wouldn't use that as like a punishment, or avoiding the athlete change pole because some technical. So if he blows through the pole, if the pole is too soft, generally I will ask the athlete to take the next pole. And one thing I can add about moving up poles, my philosophy, and I believe I had some success with it. When you move up pole, it's worth it to move at least a hand on the pole. So take a higher handhold. So that's something that can be interesting to know. If you move pole, generally I will ask the athlete to have one hand more.
One hand up, like higher up on the pole.
One hand more, hand up, yes.
Yeah.
But of course, you will work with your athlete to have the best technique. And as Doug said before, it's not always necessary to move up pole, even if you're blowing through, because you can add some technical correction to complete the next jumps.
And Cristina, what are your thoughts in terms of, like, I can see it almost like we're graduating, right? Like, I've done all these things, I've checked all these boxes, so clearly I need to move up a pole? Or is that not even an element in there? It's more about what it looks like. How do you see that as a technique of you almost using moving up a pole as a reward, seeing that might be in an athlete's mind, right?
Just in terms of like not moving them up a pole, if you're saying, okay, you can't move up to the next stick until you do this specific thing, then it kind of becomes a judgment call. Because if you've got an athlete on a stick that's just really way too small, it gets dangerous. It's a safety issue. They can get thrown so deep that they're actually off the mats. So I would keep stressing the technical changes and the corrections that we need to see, but I'm always going to want them to be on the best pole for them that day, that gives them the best chance of getting it right.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
I know we've talked a lot about the kind of the physical qualities, and as somebody that loves kind of like the mental side of this, what are some of the mental qualities that you like to see in your pole vaulters? What are some of the elements that you'd like to see? Because it is a very, I mean, you're out on the track for a while. There's a lot of things there's so many different elements that can throw you off or can actually help you continue to move up. So what are some of those mental qualities that you'd like to see from a pole vaulter? And Doug, we'll start with you.
Wow. That's a tough one because I don't think there's any roadmap for that. You see physics minds, people that are super analytical, that are successful, and you see them that gets in the way. You see people that are reckless, they're crazy, but that's only great if they still listen to their jump and don't take unnecessary risk. You see cautious people, or you see methodical people. Like there is a lot of faith. There's a lot of faith that has to happen, no matter what your other mental capabilities are. Anxiety leads to questioning this idea that you're going to sprint down the runway as fast as you can and fling yourself 15, 16, 19, 20 feet in the air. For a few people, 20 feet in the air. But I see people succeed that are all different, like high strung, super mellow. Like I don't think I have the idea to say, this is what you need to be mentally. I think you need to be committed. You can't step on the runway and be timid. You can't be questioning this. You've got to be somewhat committed, but that comes with numbers. And I want to just back up. I didn't answer the question about the pole. So reward.
Oh yeah, of course.
Sorry. I had a thought. I treat meets and practices different. Like in a meet, you may move up a pole a little bit more eagerly because you're thinking, you know what, I need to be up on the next pole to make this bar in your head, and that sometimes leads to a confidence thing as well. Like some people says, I can't jump 5 meters on this pole. I have to be on the next pole to jump 5 meters. And if that's what you feel in your head, then you kind of need to support that. But in practice, I may limit people from moving up poles if I don't see the technical things that I want to see, as long as Cristina said, as long as they're not putting themselves at risk of breaking a pole or going out the back. But yeah, that's I don't use it as a reward, but I do treat meets and practices different in terms of poles. I don't care what pole you're on in practice. I want to see us execute.
Yeah, and I could think that if speed is the limiting factor for a lot of track events, obviously, I can see when you move up a pole, you're committing to that run. There's got to be some sort of like unspoken thing, like you make a commitment when you move up a pole, especially in a competition where potentially an athlete just opens up that run. Maybe that's the one thing that for some reason it just gets them thinking, I'm opening up this run, I'm really going for it. Whereas at a smaller pool, they just weren't getting it. So potentially at a meet, it could turn out that way. In terms of the mental factors, Cristina, do you have any thoughts on some of the mental, psychological qualities of a pole vaulter?
Well, I've seen a lot of different personality types succeed in pole vault, but the thing that they have in common, they've got to be somebody who just is committed to getting better. They like a challenge. They're hardworking. Like Doug said, there's some faith involved. You have to trust the pole. You have to trust your coach in the beginning that they're not going to, put you in a situation where bad things could happen. Yeah, and I mean, you do have to be just a little bit of a daredevil, but not so much that, like Doug said, you're taking silly risks. It's a weird event, but it's a great event.
It is a very.
I think you have to love it to
right.
Put the time in that it takes to get really good. You really have to love it.
It's a virus, I think.
It is.
I think pole vault is a virus.
Oh. Well, definitely, if the community at large is, as I've seen the community at large, and you do feel a love, not just for the event, but for one another, you start to see like a lot of people being like, come on down to somewhere in the States, like as long as you're connected by pole vault, and they're like, I've got a floor that you can sleep on. And it seems like a community in which there is a lot of love for people to get better. And you see that on the event, on the day at competitions, where people are very excited to see somebody surpass their own personal best or one another, right? So I think that that's probably a great quality. I know that we only have, I think this is only supposed to be an hour, so I want to make sure that I get to some of the questions. Pole vault is an expensive event. It's the most expensive event that we have in track and field in terms of poles. So how do we get resources like poles in indoor spaces? And even how do we, what are some ideas to get people who may not have the monetary means into the event so that doesn't become a barrier? Are there certain things that coaches can do to help their pole inventory so that they're able to get kids who don't have their own inventory into the event? I'll start with Ambroise on this one.
Yes. Well, my inventory of poles started to accumulate probably in the 70s. So I've probably over 150 poles now. And what I'm doing, I coach for Vainqueur Plus, but I am the hub of pole vault in Montreal. So I have athletes from other clubs like Decathlete or other kids that are from other clubs. They do their training with the other club, but I teach them the pole vault. So if you can get in your area a resource, a track club that has pole vault, there's probably a way to make arrangement with the pole vault coach to teach your kids use the poles. And eventually, when you know what type of pole you will need, you may be able to buy your own, either by your own club or the parents sometimes. Mm-hmm. But I know it's financially challenging at times.
Right. Doug, your thoughts on getting resources, poles?
Yeah, it's a tough one because when you have a kid that's doing well, especially if they're in a program that hasn't really had the time like Ambroise does, or we've had lucky to have a lot of time to build some inventory. You could have a kid, like especially a boy, that figures it out over the course of a season or two and could be on seriously 20 poles in 2 years. Just keeps moving up poles, and in practice he could jump on 10 poles. Just because as he gets a bit more comfortable and starts being much more technically proficient. So our club has a lot of poles, and we have a lot of influence in terms of different school groups around us. So we will loan poles out, and we actually will rent poles, or we ask people to come to our facility and try out poles, just as Ambroise said, and figure out what you need. And right now, Gill, the pole manufacturer, has a buy two get one free for all Canadian pole vaulters. It's part of the Pole Vault Canada Awards program, so it's a good deal. It's a good deal, and they've been very supportive of Pole Vault Canada. So I think it's a good opportunity to build some inventory, and to kind of look at what you might need in June or July. And I know Christina's club has taken advantage of it a couple times this year, and they've bought a lot of poles. But it's amazing when you get basically 3 for 2. It really helps build some inventory and some consistency in that inventory. If you've got 5 or 6 brands of poles in your locker, it's a hard thing to really know what the next pole is in there. So I think there's an opportunity to rent, to borrow, to test, and then start building inventory of your own potentially.
And Cristina, anything to add to that? Any other ideas on how to get?
Yeah, like when my club first started out, I think we had 6 poles with the old pole vault coach, and it's just kind of been slowly whatever we could afford that year. We've got our brand new mats were half paid for with like a lottery grant. So we apply for a lot of grants. So our club purchases all the poles, and then if you are a member of the club and you're training with me, you get to use our sticks. And yeah, it's just building it up slowly. I've been really lucky the past couple of years. The club's really committed and bought me a lot of poles, but it took 10 years for us to get an inventory where we've pretty much got everybody covered now.
Yeah, it definitely does take some time, but I think, again, speaking to the pole vault community, I'm sure there's a lot of sharing of information, like the the pole deals that Gil supplies and things like that. So hopefully everybody across Canada, anybody that's on this, if you have any information, please share it amongst everybody, because the stronger that we all are, I mean, you never know, because I know that there's been times where athletes have to go to a competition and their poles are halfway across the world somewhere else, and you do need to use a pole. So if we can build out our inventory across Canada, by helping each other with resources, or even helping with being able to write grants that will help secure some money for some equipment, be it mats, be it poles, I think that will help. So hopefully I don't know if there's like some sort of cool little group online of pole vaulters across Canada, but I'm sure if there is like a message board or something that we can continue to keep getting that information. I don't know how much, if we can keep going here. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I haven't seen anything dropped into the Q&A on here. Haven't seen anything on my document here. So one thing I will ask is, what are some of the most typical breakthroughs somebody will make in training as they're improving? What are some of the things that are quintessentials, like this is a huge breakthrough for this athlete? What will a coach see that indicates that? And Ambroise, you're shaking your head, so nodding your head, I will
some
go
ideas. Generally, when an athlete, especially developing athletes, run faster, has some breakthrough in his speed, you will see it blowing through poles. So you will have to change pole in a short period of time. Generally, it's when the breakthroughs happens. That's what I saw. Sometimes you can have also a breakthrough in the technical aspect of your jump. Say some athletes have problem rocking back, putting their body inverted completely. And sometimes they, in one training, they get it and they improve by a foot or something right away. So
that aha
those
moment,
technical
right?
breakthrough and physical quality breakthrough, like especially the speed, I think I saw that.
Cristina, what are some of the breakthroughs that you've seen that some athletes may make in training that you might see that goes, oh yeah, they're onto something new. They're a new level of athlete.
Yeah, with the younger, newer vaulters, there's like breakthroughs in confidence, just in really attacking the jump, using all of their speed. When they first start out, they're not running full speed down the runway. They're just, the confidence isn't there yet. So that would be one breakthrough that I've seen that can make a big difference in how well and how high they're jumping.
And Doug, what are some of the breakthroughs that you've seen with your athletes over the years? You have a lot, probably even within some of the elite athletes, some of those breakthroughs that you might see that you go, oh, we're onto something.
It's always exciting to be working on something technically for a while and then have it show up in a real jump. You know, like have a drill that you've been working on, and all of a sudden they find it and it's like, what the heck? What happened there? That was different. There was and it's funny because sometimes those things happen and it doesn't look that different, but there's a different feeling. And for a vaulter, so much of what happens on the pole is driven by feelings. Especially like when Ambroise said, when somebody has a breakthrough and learns how to rock back for the first time or catches that recoil in their hips for the first time, they can get off the mat and their eyes are as big as dinner plates. You know, it's like, what the hell just happened? It's a different feeling. And that's a feeling that we do all these drills. We left leg swing, top arm pressure, all the drills, we're trying to give them that feeling. And then as soon as they have that feeling, now they know where they have to go. But all the drills we do and all the technical stuff is to try to give them that experience so they can lean on that. It's like that we're providing a GPS for the first few times they do this, but after they've driven there 3 times, they don't need the GPS anymore. That's a big one. And I love going to meets and having kids like jump up 3 or 4 poles and have 4 or 5 PBs and those kind of days. They don't happen at Ambroise at my age anymore.
No.
4 PB days are long gone, but they're exciting when they see a kid and they just, and it seems to somehow when they have those big PB days, that becomes the new standard. It's not like they revert back to where they were before. That's where they are, and they go on from there. So that's always
right.
Yeah, and I think that kind of, I mean, it probably happens at maybe like a globally a bigger level in the pole vault because there are all these elements and there's that gymnastic quality. But I think that's something that's pretty stable across all events is when you have that breakthrough, it's like that's that new level of athlete, right? It's almost like you feel like a new person, and this is your baseline was here, and now this is where our baseline is, and there's no going back, and that's got to be a pretty cool feeling to have. I do have one question that came in that was before the session. It asked if what is the swing timing difference between carbon and non-carbon poles? I don't know how in depth, if that's going to be a long answer or short. I know we can go a little bit over time because there are some other questions I want to get to here. So again, what is the swing timing difference between carbon and non-carbon poles? Does anybody want to take that? I don't know who would be.
Go ahead. Did you, Ambroise, you have something?
I don't have a lot of experience with those carbon poles. My daughter used to jump with Altius Carbon Elite. Actually, as a master, I jumped with her old poles, her smaller Carbon Elite. They're probably a little maybe harder to plant, harder to bend, but it seems to have a better recoil. But it depends of the vaulters. They're probably lighter, a little lighter when you run with, but slightly lighter. But what I heard, what I experimented is probably a little harder at the plant, but not that much.
Yeah.
Anybody else in terms of the
our group? We have both. We have a lot of carbon poles or composite and fiberglass poles, and we intermix them back and forth. They have changed a little bit when carbon poles first started happening in around, I guess it was around 93, 92. No, before that, 90, around 90.
90, yeah.
Around 90, they were considerably lighter. And that's when Gil was kind of experimenting with it back then, Pacer, they were about 20% lighter. But they were
fragile,
much more fragile, much more dynamic, or much more brittle and sensitive, so they needed to be protected a little more. They've done a lot of work. All the manufacturers, like Nordic makes carbon poles, Essex, of course, Gill and Altius have carbon poles, and they're not that dissimilar from glass anymore. They are lighter, but they've kind of come to a part of the problem with the carbon poles was they weren't able to bend as much, like the UCS poles, like you see Mondo jump on. The bend characteristics in carbon poles were sensitive at the beginning, and I talked to Sergey about them because Sergey did experimental jumping on. He was with Pacer when he first jumped 6 meters, and then he was experimenting on the carbon poles, and he was breaking them pretty much every time down the runway. And they couldn't get it to work for him, but he was on significantly large poles. So he changed he stayed with glass poles and went to UCS, but the UCS poles they've been very consistent and strong, a little heavier, but very strong. And I think the new model at the carbon poles is to be a little bit more like the glass poles. They bend more. They may hit a little harder at the end, or a little bit. There's a lot of debate about the timing of that, but we don't change our jump technique. I think some poles are.
That's right.
Some people can jump carbon poles comfortably. Some people can't. And some people can jump on all brands that their jump is technically strong enough that they can do all that. But they're not nuclear. Like the poles don't create energy. The energy goes in, the energy comes out. It's just a little bit different in terms of what pole you're comfortably carrying, what you're comfortable to carry, and what pole dynamic, bend dynamics, recovery dynamics works for you. But they're really it's a very complicated thing. And you'd have to put them all lined up. You'd have to have 5 poles the same, put your person jump on all 5 of them, same size pole, same run, same grip, and see how they react to see what feels best. But nobody has those kind of resources.
Right. And I'm assuming, like, I think sometimes we can get, even with spikes, we know that this is the state of the art, but it might not be state of the art for you. And I think that's the biggest thing, is being able to understand which piece of equipment is going to be best for you. Just because this is the latest and greatest, like even now with some of the spikes with the bubble, but if you have a limitation, say with an Achilles, maybe that's not the latest and greatest for you, because you might be putting yourself at a physical disadvantage by using that. So if possible, yeah, I know that you can't get the whole slew of pulls at the same size, same weight, but if you can experiment and maybe not necessarily see, I guess the carbon as the hallmark for you, if you don't feel comfortable, it doesn't make sense for you to try so hard to feel comfortable on something when you can just get better at putting the energy, like you said, Doug. It's not the pull that creates that. It's
That's
what
right.
you put into it and are able to get out. It's the investment in return. We can go over a little bit of time, but I want to be mindful of all of your time investment. And so a question that came is, getting started with an indoor jumping vaulting facility seems financially daunting, not to mention the difficulty in finding places with high enough ceilings, of course. Are there any tips? And Cristina, I'm not too sure, out in BC, you might have the luxury of not having to broker an indoor space versus outdoor with the weather, but do you have any tips on getting, finding a home for your equipment?
I would actually love to hear the answer to this, because we've been trying to sort out a way to get an indoor facility somewhere in Vancouver for a long time. There are no indoor tracks in the Lower Mainland. So we jump outside year round, which means, if it snows, we don't jump. And just with the cost of warehouse space in this city, it's really restrictive. Some of the clubs have been in discussions about how we should all get together and rent a space over the winter, but even with 4 clubs splitting it, it's still it's too much money. Like I would love to be able to do it. We just haven't found a way to be able to pay for it yet.
Right. And was any
Well,
tips
we have,
on starting an indoor
in
vaulting
Montreal,
facility?
we have the chance of having Claude Robillard Center, which has an indoor track, and I even have the luxury during the summer of having, if it's raining, we can jump inside. So we're pretty good. But in 2 years, they're gonna close our track for probably 8 months for reconstruction. So we will have to find an indoor place. We're working on it. I will probably build like Doug has a portable track, wooden track with the Mondo carpet on it. So the city will probably lend us the pit. We will look maybe to a soccer plex near where we work, or there's even a place where they do skateboarding. There might be a space there. So we will work to find a place probably with the city. But I know it's hard to have a place, to rent a place. And especially I was listening to Cristina. I know in British Columbia, the lease for industrial space must be crazy. Yeah, that's a problem. But with a portable track, you could probably install it many places where you have a high enough ceiling, an arena, a big corridor. It can be done if it need be.
Doug, your thoughts on being able to find a feasible place with high enough ceilings to start, like any tips for anybody out there trying to, like, what kind of facility or structure are you looking for?
Well, I've been in 5 or 6 different ones over the last 10 years, and every year I drive around and look for lease signs, and I'll go in and I'll find the owners. I get the landlord or the real estate agent to get me in touch with the owner, and I look for someone that's willing to be a little bit charitable. We pay rent, absolutely, we pay rent, but we don't pay fair market value for our spaces. And we sign a lease for 6 months, and basically our lease is one-sided. If they find somebody that has like a long-term tenant that would be more lucrative for them, then we get kicked out. And it's happened to us once, but luckily that landlord had another place that we moved into that wasn't maybe quite as suitable, but it was still a home for us. And if we can't do that, we've been in an agricultural building, which was limited in terms of run up and limited in terms of height, but it was great for beginners and high school kids. And then if that fails, we end up at York University. But Ange, you've been at York University at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon.
It's a lot.
Holy cow, it's a crazy spot. So hard to show up with 30 or 40 pole vaulters to a public facility and take over the runway for 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 hours a day.
Absolutely. And
Right.
I'm just like, I'm just thinking, like, sometimes there are places that you don't even think, like, maybe if there's like an abandoned mall and they're just,
Yeah.
even if it's for a season, that they're just
Yeah.
hoping that somebody can use the space that they can get some sort of money from. So maybe they
Mhm.
be more apt to saying, yeah, you can come in here for a lower amount of rent, because otherwise it just sits here empty. So maybe being able to massage places that are sitting empty, nothing's happening. So could you do us a solid and maybe we'll pay rent, but maybe not, if you can be charitable, like you said, Doug. Last question before we move on. I think this is an important one. And just real quick, so again, I want to be mindful of all of your time and thank you so much for it. How do we attract and train new coaches? And I'll just go kind of like in order from top to bottom. So Cristina, what are your thoughts on how do we train and develop coaches in this event?
A large percentage of the coaches that I know and am familiar with, we were all former vaulters. So that's how we got started in it. I think mentorships are really important, just because it takes more than just what you're going to learn in your NCCP jumps course. So I've worked with a few different more experienced vault coaches just to learn from them, to bounce ideas off them, that kind of thing. Attracting new ones, I think it's just vaulters who miss the event, miss the sport, just wanting to remain involved with it. Like Doug said, it's a virus. You just want to be around it.
That's fantastic. And Ambroise, your thoughts on how do we
yeah.
attract and train new coaches?
I believe I was not very successful to find other coaches, but generally you look to ex-athlete or your current athlete, but I haven't found the gem yet. It's our problem, because you don't make a living out of coaching. That's for sure. We all have. I was a physical therapist for 37 years, coach part-time, but for all those years. So it's maybe hard to attract kids, especially with the work market now. For a kid 17, 18, that you would want him to coach a few hours a week, he's going to have a better job, better paying job somewhere else. But yeah, sometimes if I can get somebody crazy enough to do it, sure, I will encourage him. Yeah.
Definitely. It has to be something that you're passionate about, to take the amount of time that it takes to get those, as I say, pole vault eyes. I have my hurdle eyes as a coach and as an athlete. So it does take time. So you need to find somebody who's dedicated to the cause to spend the amount of time.
That's
Doug,
right.
what are your thoughts on how do we attract and train new coaches?
Oh, wow. Being a good coach, I think, also requires, it's not a given. It's like an athlete. Just because you train doesn't mean you're going to jump 6 meters. I tried. I didn't jump 6 meters, and I tried hard. I think coaching is also, some people have a better vision, better understanding, better connection to the sport. And like in any sport, like there are good coaches in hockey, there are good coaches in basketball, of course. So attracting coaches and stuff, we, like everybody I know that's involved in it, if they weren't a pole vaulter, I can maybe pick a few people that I know that are coaching, but that weren't pole vaulters first, but boy, there aren't many. This is not something you're going to go out of your way and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to become a pole vault coach. Like, where'd that come from?
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to have some sort of in. It's not like soccer. Like, you're not going to I'm helping my son's soccer team or hockey. Like, everybody has a little bit of information if they've been around it, but pole vault is not like that. It's not like that. You're either you're kind of born into it, or you're raised in it and continue to feed that system. And as you said before, we talked about it. We're passionate, and it is a community that you want to be part of. Like, I've known each other for, I don't even know how long, a long time.
Certainly since you started.
Yeah, that's right. Like,
I was there before you.
Yeah, that's right. So I remember competing against them in the 80s, and you can always, that if there's a pole vault question for anything in Montreal, it's like, have you talked to Ambroise? Like, that's where you got to start. And the same thing with Cristina in BC, or with Mark Cox in Edmonton, or Kevin Donardo in Windsor, wherever you go. There's a guy, there's a guy or a girl.
There's always a guy. There's always a guy, always a girl.
I know a guy.
Yeah.
But attracting new ones, I think it's when you're coaching kids, and sometimes you can see people that kind of get it. That doesn't mean they can do it, but they get it.
Yeah.
They can be, you kind of start leaning on them to, you can't go into practice tonight, so can you help me for a couple hours? I got to run out. Could you take the last group? And you see them, they're good at it. Some people are really good at it. Alicia's really good at it. So it's fun to be around.
You're talking about Alicia Newman.
Yeah, I love watching her work with kids, and they're like sucking it up. It's amazing. So it's fun to see when people are good at something and they can share amount of knowledge that they know really well. And I talked to Zeke, who was my coach. I said, there's one thing in your life, what do you know the most about? It's not work. Yeah, I work. I got a job. Everybody's got a job. I got a family. Yeah, I know a lot about my family, raising kids and whatnot, but I know the most about pole vault. That's what my specialty is. And if I don't give that back, it's kind of something that's a big part of me. It's as Ambroise said, from 70 something till now. And when I started in 82, that's a long time. That's a long time. 40 years, almost 40 years.
Yeah. Well, I want to say for former athletes and also current athletes, the amount of time that you give to your current athletes, we thank you very much. Let this be a message to all of the people on the call. If you have an athlete in your group that you go, you know what, there's something about this person, I can see them giving back to the sport. Make sure you kind of, you mark them as that person that you go, you know what, I don't know, you don't have to do it now, but just always think about it, because it is a very unique event. It's really hard. I know for me, I kind of got into it, not seriously, because it was a need, and I was the jumps coach. And I was like, man, I started watching a lot of YouTube videos, but of course there's a lot of knowledge that I don't have about the field, but certain things that I can say, well, maybe this is what I know. Specifically working with a decathlete, I was like, listen, I'm no expert, but this is what it looks like. And with his knowledge of what it felt like, we're able to get him over a bar, which is the biggest thing for a multi. So I think sometimes it's based on need. And if you're a person that's there and just wants to help, sometimes you might not have the experience, but if you love track, if you love the event, you can kind of get yourself somewhere until, hopefully our athletes stay in the sport. I know Annika down in Texas, she's coaching right now. So it's great to see the generations of athletes turning coaches and giving back. So hopefully that continues on. Be on the lookout for those athletes that will be able to give back to their sport later on. This has been a fantastic chat with all of you. Thank you all so much for your time, Cristina, Ambroise, and Doug. I'm sure we'll continue to have these. I want to thank Athletics Canada for putting on this webinar series. The next one that will be coming up is called Strength for Endurance on April 27th. So anybody in the club, so pole vaulters, let your endurance friends know. If you want to hit the gym, this is a session you want to be on, because we all know that strength training is important for endurance athletes as well. Again, thank you all so much for your time and your knowledge. I want to wish you all the best for the upcoming outdoor season. Hopefully some better weather so we can get out of those indoor spaces to the outdoor spaces safely. And all the best. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks.